Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Sunday at about 9:30. So yeah, hope everyone's having a good weekend. I had a really fun weekend so far. So yeah, today's show is another kind of a rant show. I mean, I kind of rant in most of my videos anyway, but this is going to be kind of about a couple of different things. Two things I want to talk about are we had a really fun Quantum show yesterday at Opera House Video, and we put together the show, and the way we kind of structured the show was really different, and I don't know, it was really interesting. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that and how that kind of played out, and then I want to talk about John Waters, director John Waters, the legendary, uh, you know, he's looked at as the legend. Well, he's a legendary director, and he's kind of looked at as like the king of trash cinema. So and he just recently did two performances at the Waldo Theater in Waldoboro. So I want to talk about that and different things that I wanted to share about his kind of his status and his unique place that he's been at for a long time as a filmmaker, but then just as a as a an icon. So yeah, so yesterday we had a Quantum show at Opera House Video, which is the only video rental place where you can go in to a shop and actually rent physical media like movies, DVDs, Blu-rays, TV shows. They even sell and rent VHS, which is pretty wild. VHS has like come back in this really weird way, but I have such a deep connection to Opera House Video. It's like I don't know. I in all actuality though, it's kind of funny or weirdly ironic, I guess, but I don't actually go there as much just because I which I'm chomping at the bit because it's actually been a while and I'm going to be going up again. I haven't actually bought any new movies in a while. I've been trying to save a little bit of money and stuff, but so I'm chomping at the bit, but that's going to happen really soon. But earlier this year and definitely last year, I bought a lot of movies. It was the most movies I've ever bought, for my for my love and my collection. Just I've really gotten a lot of movies the last few years, especially the last year or so, and beginning of this year. And usually, like after I buy, I mean, sometimes you see it on YouTube a lot where I see it a lot, and I honestly I think it kind of annoys me a little bit, but there's a lot of times where a lot of YouTube people out there will do shows on their like monthly hauls of movies that they've bought. They'll like one of the labels, one of the boutique labels might have a giant sale, and so people will they'll buy a shit ton of movies, and they'll do a show where they'll talk about all those movies. But what I find a lot of the times is that even guys that I really like is they don't uh, really watch all of the movies that they buy. They sometimes do it more from a collector's standpoint, where they'll like just buy movies just because they're completionists. Like they it can be like say a franchise, and they'll just buy every movie in that franchise just to have the completion, but they won't actually watch the movies. And that's not always the case, but I definitely think it happens more and more where there's more collectors now than ever as far as physical media, which I'm definitely one of those people. But I find that a lot of the times people don't always watch their movies, and they just kind of like treat it like they're buying books for their own library, and they want to have a specific edition to complete their collection, and then they just kind of you know seal it and put it away. For me, it's like I love to watch everything that I buy. Every show that I do on this channel is about movies I've owned or movies I do own and movies that I see in the theater and just movies that I experience. One of and very rarely, very rarely do I watch movies online, unless it's like a complete, you know, like a completely desperate situation. Case in point, I had a friend recommend a movie, this British horror movie called Ritual, that came out in 2017, and I had heard about this British horror movie a lot before, and I had the hardest time finding it. I couldn't find it anywhere. And this was going back a few years ago. I couldn't find it anywhere, and so I, checked out Opera House Video. They didn't have it. Even in my travels to video shops and what have you, Bull Moose especially, couldn't find it. No one had any idea where to get it. So, and then I heard about it again fairly recently, and I was like, after hearing about it again from my friend Gabe, I was like, okay, I'm going for it. And I spent 2 hours scouring the internet to try to find this fucking movie because I was like, okay, I got to see this. I keep hearing about this movie and all these things. So, and I finally found it, and it was really, really good. And I did a show on that. And there's been like a couple of other situations where that's happened. Like another fantastic movie, Lake Mungo, which is a Australian horror film that's amazing, amazing film. And it was the same kind of set of circumstances. A really obscure movie, really hard to find, and pound for pound one of the scariest movies I think ever made. And I found it somewhere online. I can't even remember where, and I saw it because I had no access to it anywhere. Couldn't find it anywhere. And then I eventually bought it. I now own it on Blu-ray. So there's been, you know, situations like that in a state of where I'm in a state of desperation to find a movie, especially if I keep hearing about it and I can't find it. But generally, I hate watching movies online because it sucks. The quality sucks. You get commercials now. But in those examples, it's it was still a wonderful experience. So we just did a show at Opera House Video, and I have a long history with them. I've had a membership there for a long time, and so the reason I don't go there quite as much is I I I have a lot of movies, so I like to when I buy a lot of movies over that period of time, 6 months or even that year, I really try to like immerse myself in those movies and really because I watch a lot of movies over again. I don't just buy it, see it once, and then put it in the shelf, or just buy it and then just stick it away. I try to watch everything that I do, and I'm always through that process. I'm always discovering movies that, oh wait, I still haven't watched that one, or wait, I still haven't watched this one, or I've never done a review on this one. So I'm always doing that in my time, and in my free time, to watch movies, that takes up all that time. So, but I still do rent movies there, and I always support them. Um, but I just don't as much because I have a lot of movies that I'm still getting to on my own. But anyway, we played. This was our third show at Opera House Video, and Dennis Howard, who's the owner, I've been friends with him for a very long time. He's one of the directors at WERU, an independent radio station that's been around for a very long time. He's also the owner of the video shop, Opera House Video, and he's also a DJ. So he's a professional DJ, and he DJs parties and weddings and all kinds of things. And so he's very much versed in music and everything. And he's a he loves films. Like, he is really into movies. He's not just, a business owner. So he really cares about the movies he has, and he's seen so many movies, and he's really knowledgeable. So it's great. So about I think it was last year, we did our first. It was kind of an experiment just to see how things would go. And last year we did a show, just us, a Quantum show. It was during the summer, and I think we played at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. just to basically play a set, and we played like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it went pretty good. Like it was, it was mellow. We have to kind of watch our volume because it's a store and everything, and it's and he's got customers, but it was pretty cool. It was we wanted to see what it would be like, and Dennis had said that he had these aspirations at one point to like basically have more live music in the space, which is a wild thing because it's not a music venue, it's a video shop. But for me, when I go there, which I do go still go there all the time, it feels like I'm in my living room. It feels like a second home to me. And so we did that one show, and then over the winter time we did a second show where we did a second show at nighttime, and it was like in the winter, and it was on a Thursday night, and my friend Leo, who I play in the band Osmia with, also played with us. And that was cool, but it was actually a really fun show, and it was a cool thing. But there wasn't as many people there, and there was less traction because the store was actually closed, and it's not really known as a venue. So then fast forward this past May, where they had the All Roads Festival, which is an amazing music festival that comes to Belfast every year. Dennis used Opera House Video as a regular venue, and it was actually billed as a venue for a lot of the local artists. And during the festival, we had played there. We played a Quantum show there that Saturday, and I had a free pass to go see all the music. And I remember on Saturday I went to Opera House, and they had music in there, and it was really great, and it was really cool. It was, there was a few people there. The store was open, but it was just I don't know, really cool atmosphere having music in there, and the music I saw in there was really awesome. And Dennis was really excited. They had a punk band in there that was really loud and crazy, and they had music throughout the day there, and I just thought that was awesome. Like, I mean, because for me, it's like perfect symmetry because I'm, I love movies. I'm obsessed with movies. For me, movies are the biggest source of inspiration for my band Quantum, and I get to play in a place that feels like I'm in my living room. So it's like, it's perfect. So after that experience of seeing other bands play at Opera House, I was like, this is this is great. It's probably never going to be known as a music venue, but for what it is, I think it's great. So yesterday we did a show we had a Quantum show there, and we did it early in the day. We started about 1:30, and my friend Ronnie, who I've played a lot of music with, he has an electronic group that's mostly kind of ambient inspired improv electro kind of stuff. Also has a real big kind of world music flavor to it, really creative, just awesome stuff. And he's had this, and it's called Sonic Wallpaper, and he's had this project, and it's a one man show for quite a few years. And it's very experimental. It gets really out there at times and strange, but it's just really cool. And it definitely has an appeal, like a commercial appeal to it because of I think because of the world music flavor that it has. Also, he builds his own guitars. I mean, he's kind of a mad genius. And I used to play in a band with Ronnie called Bone Broth, which was a really fantastic band for a while. And that's how we kind of came together. And then with the electronic stuff, we both, have done quite a few shows together. So I had this idea of doing another show at Opera House Video, and then if try to get Ronnie on board, and we both play, in the shop. And there was, it's a tiny little spot, but there was actually plenty of room for us, and the setup is great. It's, it's pretty tiny in there, but being that both of our bands, like our setups, are pretty compact, relatively small. We've both been in a lot of gig situations where we've played bigger places and then really tiny little places. So I think we're both pretty good at adapting to that. And so I had this idea to put this together, and then about a month ago, before I actually put the show together, I went to a friend of mine, Patricia Mason, was playing at Hey Sailor, and she was doing like a singer songwriter showcase, and it was this round robin thing, and there was about six other guitar player singer songwriters there, and it was actually really cool. It was all like mostly acoustic music, more on the folk side of things, and the whole the format was great. I thought the format was awesome, and basically what they did at Hey Sailor was, and they still do this. It's a regular monthly series, I think, that they do, and basically it's a thing of where each person gets like three or four songs, and then they just it's a round robin thing, and they just kind of rotate. One person they go down the line, and one person goes to the next, and it goes for about they did it for about hour and a half or so, and it was really cool because it was like constant music. It had a lot of variety to it, and everybody had their little chance to shine, and it created this cool space of like you had a lot of different moods, you had a lot of different feels, and I like that it was just this like continuous thing. So, and that's something you hear and you see, like that classic scenario of where and it's part of the tradition of folk music, sharing songs and sharing stories, around the campfire. It's a that's kind of what that tradition is. So after seeing this concert, and I love the format, I was like, why don't we try that with this show at Opera House Video with the electronic music? Because for me, electronic music is the new folk music. So I've had this idea of, why don't we do that, do the same thing, but with two electronic groups. And both of our bands also have live instrumentation incorporated with the digital. So it's not fully electronic. It's not, you know, just two guys or girls behind a laptop. It's all none of us use computers, so it's all, you know, very I think pretty organic that way. So I had this idea like why don't we try that same kind of thing where we play like, 15-20 minute set, but we just kind of go back and forth as opposed to like trying to do away with that traditional thing of like, okay, Ronnie, you play a set, play for an hour or 2 hours or whatever, and then we'll play for an hour or 2 hours, and and just divide it up that way, like that traditional thing. And I thought, well, that's cool, but why don't we get away from that and try this thing of where we're gonna play 15 minutes or 20 minutes and play off of each other, and we're like rotating back and forth. And so that was the idea, and everybody involved with the show, me, Mike, Ronnie, and Dennis. They were all really into that idea. They were like, okay, that's kind of a cool idea, like taking that concept and applying it to electronic music and the performance aspect. So it was really cool. That's basically what we did. Like every 15 minutes, we kind of rotated a set. And the real interesting thing with Ronnie's music is he is mostly, totally, most of the music he does is totally improvised. And he does have a lot of material, tons of songs. And I've seen him play sets of where he'll play more, kind of structured, preconceived tunes. But a lot of the times he does this very kind of in the moment, you know, uh, improvised, kind of a thing. And that's kind of what he did yesterday. And like with what we do with Quantum is like we we have a lot of tunes, and our sets are usually set up where it's focused on kind of reading the vibe of the room and that kind of thing, but it's all based on more or less songs, and the tunes that we have are very structured, but a lot of the tunes are structured in a way where we can kind of improvise within them. And there's usually usually every gig there's always there's sometimes not it's not always a thing, but there are times like for certain gigs that we play where we'll have moments of where maybe a tune or so where we'll do something that's totally unplanned and it's totally improvised. But for the most part, our concentration is on the songs, and this is kind of how things are. And so it was really interesting trying to like. For me, it was I don't know. It was really challenging. It took me out of my comfort zone, and it made me like get away from like somewhat of the tradition that I follow. And I like that. I like being challenged. And it was really fun because it was, like for instance, Ronnie would create this mood with like a particular piece or song and this vibe, and then I could have easily, just been like, okay, when his 15 minutes are up and he's like, playing his doing his thing, I could easily have just like gone into like one of our regular tunes. But and in the moment when things were happening, I was kind of going to do that because I obviously feel a little more comfortable doing that. But then I realized it's not going to really fit the vibe. It's not going to really fit um, it's not going to fit the space he's kind of creating and curating. So it made me think of like, well, how can I really try to dial in and establish that, try to do something with that theme or that idea and continue it and then do something different within that and then pass it back to him. So it was really interesting. So I found myself having to really, we did a lot of improv, and which, like, Ronnie can play a whole night's worth of improvised music, and we can't really do that. That's a very different thing for us. So I like being challenged that way. So that's what, essentially what it was, where, he would establish something, and then we would kind of roll with it or take try to take some of those things that he was putting out there and essentially like kind of respond to it, mostly in a very improvised kind of way. And then vice versa, like there were times where we did end up segueing into more of our tunes that we have, and then he would take that kind of vibe and then kind of sing it back to me, and then he would take in a different direction, and it was a really cool exercise, and I really loved it. It was fun, it was exciting, it was challenging. There was a level of like truly this like blank slate in front of you, and not knowing how it's gonna work out or how you're gonna navigate it. And I like that we played for about 2 hours that way, and I loved the. It was really challenging. That's the thing I loved most about it, and we did this whole kind of exchange for 2 hours, and I love that there was no real breaks, and there was a lot of ebb and flow, and there was a lot of variety, I think, and it was really cool. And there was quite a few people there walking through the shop and popping in, and it felt like it was cool. So it was a blast. It was a really fun experience, and I think we're gonna do another show with that same kind of thing later in the summer. So stay tuned for something for a future date because it was really fun. So, and then the second topic I wanted to talk about today was the legendary director John Waters just appeared at the Opera House Video. John Waters just came and performed at the Waldo Theater in Waldoboro, Maine, which is an amazing, beautiful theater. It was all put together by Buffy and Sam, who run the Waldorf After Dark. They got to hang out with him, and basically, I guess I heard that John Waters wanted to go to a local dive bar, and they took him out to a dive bar. Like, that's insane. Um, John Waters, of course, a legendary director. I'm a huge John Waters fan, and he's made so many great films and such films that are complete and utter trash, you know. And but the thing that I wanted to talk about with John Waters is there's other directors that I feel, you know, the interesting thing with John Waters is like he's really, I don't know, I think culturally really pierced his way through the Matrix. Because when you look at his films and watch his films, like, I mean, his shit is wild and crazy. Super low budget. It's downright nasty. And you know, Pink Flamingos being his biggest one. But his movies are such trash, but wonderful, beautiful, wholesome trash, if you will. And again, it goes back to my favorite style of film is exploitation. And you know, he was a purveyor of perverted cinema and one of the kings in the world of exploitation. So, and it's interesting because he has like, I know so many people that know who John Waters is, but I don't think they are into exploitation cinema at all. Like, and I've been really surprised by. I mean, he he came to Waldo Theater last summer, and both he played. He basically goes up, uh, goes does a performance. It's like a spoken word. It's a comedy thing. He talks about everything. I guess I didn't get a chance to see him, unfortunately. But he comes up on stage. It's basically him for 2 hours just talking about everything, talking about his experiences, I guess, and like, you know, telling jokes and just being a little pervert that he is, like, just, you know. And I've heard it's amazing. And he came up last year and did two shows at the Waldo Theater, and both shows were sold out completely and months in advance. And then also the past two shows he played this past Friday and Saturday at the Waldo Theater, and both shows were sold out completely. And it's amazing because I know of a lot of people that have went to it, and as far as I'm aware, they're not really into like quote unquote exploitation movies. Like they're not really, like, they know of his films and they've watched them and they're obviously probably big fans. I mean, John Waters has done many things outside of films. I mean, principally he's known as a filmmaker, director, and he's made a shit ton of movies. And but he's done like, you know, lots of other things, multimedia things. You know, he's done. I believe he's got a ton of books out. He doesn't really direct movies anymore, and he's done all kinds of other things outside of the film world. And I think mainly it's as an author. But I don't believe he's directed a movie in a very, very long time. I think he's essentially kind of retired as a director. But, you know, I've just been kind of blown away by people that I know that have gone, that, you know, saw him, and a few of those folks, like, we've talked about movies or whatever here and there, and as far as I know, like, they're not into exploitation movies. It's just, but like, the thing with John Waters is like he is such a household name, and he's embraced. He's one of those iconic figures in cinema that, and just in in the world, that like it's hard to find. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't know who John Waters is. It's wild. Like I think even my parents would know who he is. He's been able to kind of really, you know, somehow be embraced by everyone. And when you look at his art and what he's put out, especially his films, it's like, you know, his shit is not for everyone. Like, it's downright nasty, you know, and amazing, but like super raw and dirty and just total trash. And it's really interesting culturally how he's been he's so recognized and so um, looked up to by, well, if I dare say it, middle America. And it's really interesting. I kind of feel like it's almost like this weird phenomenon. You know, kind of when I think about you know, did some shows on the late great David Lynch, and they also the Waldo Theater did a big tribute for him, and I did some reviews and got to see Eraserhead and Wild at Heart on the big screen, which was both amazing experiences. I did some shows on this channel about that, and it's just wild to me that like and I look at it like David Lynch is also one of those characters, one of those people in cinema that everybody kind of knows who he is, but when you look at his work, you know, it's not made for mass consumption in any way, or. But and the interesting thing, like when David Lynch, of course, directed and the famous TV show Twin Peaks, that was and that show was wild, super dark and twisted and kind of fucked up and just super bizarre. But yet that show was embraced by everyone, middle America, like people that you wouldn't normally think know that would watch his work all know him and love him. The same thing has happened to me, like I would describe the John Waters experience with people that I know, has happened to me with David Lynch, where people that I would never think in a million years would be into those kinds of films know who David Lynch is and love him, and I'm like, wow, like that's wild. And I feel like those are two figures that have definitely like penetrated this weird matrix that we live in, as far as you know filmmakers that really do experimental things, filmmakers that really do avant-garde cinema for that matter, and also total you know in John Waters' case, like a total purveyor of trash, but yet everyone and their grandmother loves him. It's very interesting, and I was like thinking about that a lot, and it's something I've thought a lot about in the past, where you know um, when I think of other directors that are exploitation directors that I feel have done this basically in regards to like you know exploitation cinema, they've done the same kind of work. They've done exploration of all of the murky depths of perversity just as much as John Waters. And two directors that I absolutely love, that are two of my favorite directors, that are for me kings of that murky world of exploitation. Jess Franco, famous, well, not famous, but in the niche that is exploitation, he is famous. But outside of that, nobody knows who the fuck he is. Jess Franco, Spanish director, probably the most prolific director uh, that I've ever known. Just something I've seen counts of where people have said that there's almost 200 films that he made over his career, and he was a Spanish director, and he was an exploitation director. He made all kinds of styles in the exploitation world. He made westerns. He made uh, all kinds of fantastic giallo films. He made sex exploitation movies. He made horror films. But the honestly the most prolific director I've ever come across. Before that, probably the most like as far as just the sheer body of work, which was insane. And granted, a completely different kind of director and style, but Akira Kurosawa, famous Japanese director, you know, almost 100 movies, I believe, to his credit. And one of my favorite directors of all time. But when I discovered Jess Franco, I was just like, oh my God, like this guy was insane. Like he made like sometimes 3 movies a year. Like he was a fucking madman. But amazing. And granted, he made, most of his movies probably cost like, I don't know, $50, or at least they looked like it when they were made. But he made higher budget films as well. But he really, really, was an underground filmmaker. And you know, and he's one of my favorite directors. I discovered him more. I had seen some of his films growing up as a kid, but it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago where I really started to recognize him, who he was, and really started buying. And I've bought a lot of his films since. And then another one of my all-time favorite directors is Herschel Gordon Lewis. The king of gore, the guy who basically was doing practical effects and gore and graphic violence on screen before anyone else. He was the man who created practical effects for horror films. Really, he did it before any American director. He did it before any Italian director, any European director. He was the man that was the first one to capture on film, copious amounts of gore and blood. And, arguably, he was one of the first, directors to, um, you know, usher in the kind of the slasher genre, too. One of the most important figures. But his films were, complete and utter trash. Total trash. And people would regard it as a lot of his films as just being garbage. But I love his shit. And he's one of my favorite directors. And my whole point of bringing up like directors like Jess Franco and Herschel Gordon Lewis is outside of the people that are into real, like you have the, well, people like me, I guess, but outside of people who are really just into like they really know and really love the world of exploitation cinema. Outside of that, nobody knows who the fuck Jess Franco is or Herschel Gordon Lewis is. No one. It's happened to me. It still happens to me. Like I've talked to tons of people that are even into, you know, trash cinema, and they don't know who Herschel Gordon Lewis is, and I'm like, he's like, kind of the godfather of that cinema, I think, and I'm always like really surprised that nobody outside of this little niche of people, nobody knows who he is, and especially the same thing with Jess Franco. And I understand that because I didn't get, I only discovered them as directors probably about five years ago. But I just think it's so interesting that like, Jess Franco, and then Herschel Gordon Lewis and John Waters, like they were directors making the same movies basically. They were all, making these really dirty ass exploitation movies. But John Waters is so well known, and I'm like, why? How come that didn't happen to Herschel Gordon Lewis? Why didn't that happen for Jess Franco? Like outside, why does middle America embrace John Waters, but they don't know who the fuck Herschel Gordon Lewis is or Jess Franco? It's weird. I don't get it. But somehow, culturally, and I'm not knocking John Waters at all because he's a master and he deserves all the praise and then some. But I'm just like perplexed as to like somehow why you know, he's so embraced and loved by everyone and everybody knows who he is inside and outside the world of exploitation cinema. But not the case with Herschel Gordon Lewis, not the case with Jess Franco at all. And you look at their careers. I know even John Waters and Herschel Gordon Lewis at one point were friends, I believe. I've seen a lot of photos of them together. Jess Franco, I believe, has passed on. Herschel Gordon Lewis passed on a few years ago, but left an amazing legacy of just pure trash cinema. But I'm always like, wow, how did that work? How did that pan out that way? And yeah, it's really wild. And I think a lot of it's attributed to, you know, John Waters has always stayed pretty high profile, and his personality is so like over the top and insane, and I think that has really helped propel his popularity. Him being on talk shows over the years, and just and he's written lots of books, and has had all these insane experiences, and so he's kind of been maybe more as just the man himself, more in the public than say John, than say Herschel Gordon Lewis, who did have do interviews, but he's more known on as just that filmmaker guy who made trashy movies, and the same thing with Jess Franco. So it's really interesting. I kind of wanted to just share some thoughts or some around that, how that is, why that is so different. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.